All right, so I am going to go ahead and get us started with our evening tonight. We are recording this so that anybody that is not able to attend is able to see. And welcome to everybody that is here. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our first parent night for Petaluma City Schools. We split it into two nights. So tonight is for elementary, tomorrow night is for secondary, so 7th through 12th grade, so that we can kind of tailor the information that is going out to better meet the needs of your parenting style and your children at home. So thank you for all of you for being here. I'm Gina Roberts. I am in a new position here with Petaluma City Schools as the Student and Family Engagement Coordinator and planning different events and activities for our students and families of the entire district. And Jimena Gomez is here with us tonight. She is our new Wellness Coordinator. And I'll let you go ahead and translate real quick, Jimena.
Bienvenidos a todos. Es un placer tenerlos el día de hoy. Como dijo mi compañera Gina, los dos puestos de nosotras es totalmente nuevo. Gina es la nueva coordinadora de familiares y estudiantes en cómo traer más recursos y involucrar un poco más a nuestra comunidad del distrito junta. Y ya al lado mío es en el área del bienestar de los estudiantes y de las familias. El día de hoy vamos a estar hablando de los límites. Es una de las primeras información de una primera información que vamos a tener los familiares y esperamos poder tener más dependiendo de cómo nos va esta noche. Esperemos que disfruten la información y les damos la bienvenida a todos. Go ahead, Gina.
Hi. So we are lucky that we have side by side here with us tonight. So we have a contract with this company that is working with our middle schools and our high schools and also offering some support for parents to be able to give information out to better support all of our students in the district. So we are lucky to have them here tonight to be able to work with us in conjunction to present. So we have Vernon Pope, who is here, the lead for Side by Side, and I will let him take it away.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vernon Pope Banks, and as Gina said, I am the program supervisor of the Youth Thrive program. And tonight we are bringing you a special segment brought to you by two really hardworking clinician trainees, one being Bianca Pulido and the other being Cecia Hovel, and they're going to bring you a dynamic presentation tonight. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy and learn because I'm also a parent. So thank you for having us.
Jimena, I'll let you translate that and then we can go through the logistics.
Queremos presentarles al grupo Side by Side. El Distrito Escolar de Petaluma tiene un contrato con esta agencia. Ayudan en las escuelas, tienen diferentes grupos de soporte y ayuda, como también ayuda emocional y mental que se está necesitando en las escuelas. En este día queremos presentar a Vernon. Vernon acabó de mencionar que hoy vamos a tener dos personas que van a estar dando una presentación en la cual han trabajado fuertemente sobre los límites y cómo podemos aprender sobre eso y enseñar con nuestros hijos. Entonces queremos darle la gran bienvenida a Bianca Pulido, que va a ser la persona que va a dar la presentación en inglés, y tenemos a Cecia Joven, que va a estar en el canal de español. Entonces ahorita pueden ver que hay un globito en la parte de abajo donde pueden seleccionar el idioma de preferencia. Entonces, los que gusten escuchar toda la presentación en español, les damos la bienvenida y les dejamos saber que por ahí pueden escuchar toda la presentación en español. Muchas gracias, Bernard, por estar aquí. Bianca y Cecilia, estamos muy emocionados de aprender junto a ustedes. I'll let Gina say that.
That was great. You just did so much in one. Oh my goodness. Thank you. All right. So we are going to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, it is recording so that we can send this out to anybody who was not able to make it, because I had quite a few families email that they were interested but had conflicts. So we will email it out. And we also do have, as Jimena just mentioned, translation. So you can hit the globe if you need it, as she just walked you through if you need that piece. And you'll still see the same presentation. Cecia will just be translating that piece and Bianca will be doing the presentation in English. So we have that. So I will let you guys take it away, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
And then lastly, Q&As will be answered at the end. And if you do have questions throughout, we do have the Q&A, and Gina or I will be responding to those if we have the answers to it. I'm not sure we covered that, just to mention it.
And somebody else asked already in the chat, so people know that it's working. You are automatically muted. It is a webinar. It's different than regular Zoom, so you won't be able to raise your hand or unmute during it, but you can send us a question during the presentation, and if we're able to answer it, we will. Otherwise, we'll answer it live at the end and have time for those questions at the end.
Mencionándolo en español, si tienen alguna pregunta, tengan la libertad de escribir su pregunta en el área de Q&A, preguntas y respuestas. Estaremos contestando Gina o yo. Pueden darse cuenta que no pueden levantar la mano ni tampoco a participar en el chat. Esta va a ser nuestra forma de comunicación. Al final, cualquier pregunta que tengan para nuestros presentadores del día de hoy, lo estaremos preguntando al final de la presentación. We're ready to go, Bianca. Thank you.
All righty, I will go ahead and share my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Great. So today we will be talking about how to create healthy boundaries. And we are here on behalf of Side by Side, You Thrive. And again, we are Bianca and Cecia. We are both bilingual clinicians at Side by Side and marriage and family therapy interns on behalf of USF. So this is typically what we do when we're giving classroom presentations. If you've seen us out and about at some of your schools, we'll go through a rose and a thorn. And since this webinar is not so interactive, we will not be showing you an example, but this is truly what we get the presentation started, just to have a check-in with the students and see how they're relatively doing. And most often this is kind of an indicator of how we are doing emotionally, physically, mentally. So it's kind of a good thing to start off with. Alrighty. So we mentioned we were talking about boundaries today and how to set them. So boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify for themselves what are reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for people to behave around them and how they will respond when someone steps outside of those limits. The easiest way to think about a boundary is a property line. We have all seen no trespassing signs, which send a clear message that if you violate that boundary, there will be a consequence. Personal boundaries help you decide what types of communication, behavior, and interaction are acceptable. So here we have the importance of setting healthy boundaries. So to practice self-care and self-respect, this is important. This is seeing this as from the individual's perspective. And pretty soon you'll see that we'll get into the parent and child dynamic, but this is just to explain just the importance overall. So to practice self-care and self-respect, to communicate your needs in the relationship, and to make time and space for positive interactions to set limits in a relationship in a way that is healthy. So next, we'll probably skip this. This is a visual demonstration that so there are 6 types of boundaries. And so I will go through them with you. So there are physical boundaries, emotional and intellectual, and personal and time, as well as material and financial boundaries. So for physical boundaries, they include your body and sense of personal space, sexual orientation, and privacy. These boundaries are expressed through clothing, shelter, noise tolerance, verbal instruction, and body language. An example of physical boundary violation, a close talker. So your immediate and automatic response is to step back in order to reset your personal space. By doing this, you send a nonverbal message that when this person stands so close, you feel an invasion of your personal space. If the person continues to move closer, you might verbally protect your boundary by telling him or her to stop crowding you. Other examples of physical boundary invasions are inappropriate touching, such as unwanted sexual advances, looking through other person's personal journals or letters or devices, as well as not allowing others their own personal space. So for example, like barging into the bathroom when your high schooler is in there. This may be a little bit different for like youth that your children, if they're smaller and kind of need your assistance, but it kind of goes along with when they are a little bit older. And emotional and intellectual boundaries are boundaries that protect your sense of self-esteem and ability to separate your feelings from others. When you have weak emotional boundaries, it's like getting caught in the midst of a hurricane with no protection. You expose yourself to being greatly affected by others' words, thoughts, and actions, and end up feeling bruised, wounded, or battered. These include beliefs, behaviors, choices, sense of responsibility, and your ability to be intimate with others. Examples of emotional and intellectual boundary invasions are not knowing how to separate your feelings from your partner's and allowing his or her mood to dictate your level of happiness or sadness. And this is a little bit more complex, but it is an example of codependency. Also, another example is sacrificing your plans or dreams and goals in order to please others around you, or not taking responsibility for yourself and blaming others for your problems. So next, communication. So all of this is mentioned because really communication is the foundational piece of boundaries to even be implemented from a parent and child dynamic. And as we can see here, that it is really valuable to have good communication skills, and it allows for you to be more trustworthy to your child. And then you might want to implement like less is more with them, something brief and to the point that they could really, that's tangible and that they could grasp. Being precise kind of goes with that less is more piece, and involving the child in the boundary setting process to make them feel included and like it is something that they agree with, rather than, so that you're both on the same page and you have that further understanding of one another and what is expected. So another thing that could be done for communication is posting the rules. So again, so keeping that expectation around, on the fridge or somewhere in their room, on the door as they exit, so that they could kind of remind themselves that, oh, this is what is expected, or this is, what we are going to talk about moving forward, or what the boundary is here, and, this is how I respect it or whatnot. And then 6 says recognize appropriate behavior. So that's kind of like noticing or appreciating or valuing positive behaviors or addressing of the boundary limits. And when that is done, you definitely want to praise the child for that. 7, avoid labeling children as good or bad. So I know that we tend to gravitate to, talking to children and the fact that they are either good or bad, rather than speaking to the action and addressing that versus like the persona and who they are, because we have often in the past tended to jump to saying, oh, well, you weren't a good girl today, Sally, or you weren't a good boy today. And that kind of just leaves the child with a bad or negative viewpoint of themselves, which can lead to further damage or harm growing up. 8, do not undermine the other parent. So if you're working collaboratively or not in split households, it is always important to kind of keep the dialogue open and keep the other parent in consideration, and keep that respect amongst the parents. That way that the youth is able to view the parents in the same way, in the same regard, with that respect and admiration. And that should really be in a dual relationship kind of way. And then employ natural consequences when possible. So, keeping straightforward, but like if a child engages in this behavior, then the consequence is XYZ, so that it's something that is understood, that is coming after maybe a negative behavior, or not an understanding of a set boundary in place. And then 10, for whoever is comfortable, maybe drawing this up, writing this up, and this would kind of go with the including the child in this process of the boundary setting, so that they could see it in place and see the posted rules about this information.
And just so everybody knows, we're pausing because Cecia is translating at the exact same time. So we're giving her time to finish up her piece.
Absolutely. But this time that we are waiting, it's also a nice reminder to ourselves to, if we have any questions or comments that are coming up, to maybe put them up on the questions board, and we can open maybe more discussion toward the end of our presentation, but keep those in mind. So setting limits. So like a little bit like the what we just went over about communication, but the importance of, being clear with setting limits and being consistent with the child or youth, so that they really know what's expected. And 3, provide an alternative behavior, and maybe an actual example of a behavior, or maybe a different kind of response that could be made. And then pairing limits with the reasonable consequences. So you never want to do something so unreasonable that it will be not likely that you will, I apologize, that you won't be able to back it up. You want to be able to state something that is just within a reasonable circumstance after the consequence or the action of the behavior. And you want to lead these conversations in setting limits with a positive statement, so that the youth or child is able to see it in a way that isn't like a look down upon, consequence, and not seeing it as a negative thing. Consequences are a natural thing. There could be positive and negative consequences, but not seeing it in such a punishment type of way. Another thing to setting limits would be offering choices when you are able, and and you can assess as the parent, if they've, where the child has been along the line of these conversations about setting limits. So then you might want to be able to give the child a little bit more say in the conversation as well. And then lastly, you wouldn't like to go about this in a way that you are arguing already. It's already like it would create this battle dynamic and a power dynamic, which you are really trying to lessen to get closer to being at an equal level space for your child to understand really what the boundary setting process is looking like. So next, independence. So providing these boundaries and encouraging independence are really tightly connected in the parenting goals. Children become competent by having rules and limits about behavioral expectations, and they survive and thrive by being both protected from too much and pushed toward enough independent functioning. By providing behavioral limits and structure throughout childhood, children internalize boundaries and become increasingly responsible. For example, asking your child to pick up after themselves and letting them carry on the task independently. So let's say there's a scenario similar to, you asked your child engaged in play, and the expectation was that you allowed to have the child play after they did some of their homework and as you prepared dinner. And so next, as the parent, dinner is finished. So you tell your son or daughter to pick up their toys because they're gonna have dinner soon. And the child says, no, I don't want to pick up my toys, or you help. I want mommy or daddy to help me pick up my toys. And then the appropriate response would be something like, I let you know before you engaged in play or you started to play that as soon as dinner was ready that you would have to pick up your toys. And I know that you are sad because you want mommy and daddy, or mommy or daddy, your brother or sister to help you, but really this was your mess. So in order to have dinner together, we will be waiting on you to kind of pick up these toys and get it all tidy so that we can get to dinner soon. And so this kind of allows the normalization of feelings, but also you're keeping to those natural consequences that were coming, that you set that expectation, and it's not like, okay, well, mommy will come help you after all, because it's a lot bigger of a mess than you expected. There could be some exemptions, times that this can happen, but it really would be the most ideal if there was a consistent way to kind of continue with this expectation, because it provides so much autonomy and responsibility to the child, that then allows for further independence for their development, and really understanding about boundaries. Because as we talk more and more about these boundaries, I mean, how much do we already know that they follow through? It's not just when we're children that we need boundaries. They start, I mean, it's really important to set these foundational boundaries, but as we get older, we still need to set limits around close to so many things in our social relationships, and so much more moving forward. So now we will be talking about barriers. So it seems obvious that no one would want their boundaries violated. So why do we allow it? Why do we not enforce or uphold our boundaries? And this could be, for many reasons, many. But some common themes and why we engage in this is fear of rejection and ultimately abandonment, fear of confrontation, guilt, or because we were not taught growing up these things, and so it was not implemented in our environment or in our most close, social dynamics, and for safety concerns, and if this is the case, then it would be expected, or hopefully that we seek out some support systems if we are in a situation where we feel that any of these boundaries are not able to be held, and we are in predicaments that are unsafe or unhealthy for us in a more severe way. So next I will take you to a visual demonstration. And I'm hoping that the audio, you let me know.
One of the most frustrating things for parents is getting their children to do what they want. We all feel that we should just be able to say, yeah, do this, do that, but they don't. Children don't do what we ask them to do often. And worse yet, sometimes they do things that we ask them not to do. And it's hard to stop them from doing those things. When a parent wants a child to stop doing something, that's called setting a limit. The parent sets a limit and says, no, 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 stop, don't do that, right? Or sometimes a parent says they want you to do something to the child. So the parent says, yes, you may watch that show on your screen, but first you must do your homework. That's also setting a limit when you're trying to get them to do something. And parents find setting limits to be the hardest thing because children don't necessarily cooperate with them. And the parent doesn't want to be mean, but they need to get the child to do what they want. So researchers have looked at this problem and they've discovered that there are basically 4 ways that parents deal with it. The first way that's very common is that parents are very strict and they say, do this now, don't do that. And they might smack their child or they might punish their child, but they try very hard to be strict to make the child do what they want. That's one approach. We call that the authoritarian or strict approach. The problem with that is that the child doesn't necessarily learn to think for themselves. They're doing what you want only because they're a little frightened. And so you keep having to get more and more, you punish more because otherwise they stop listening to you. And for children who are very strong-willed, they will just become rebellious. They will just say, no, you can't make me do it. And even children who are not strong-willed, they may appear to comply with you, but often they are secretly learning to lie to you. So authoritarian parenting, when kids grow up, the research shows, doesn't work all that well. And so those children really don't get help with their emotions. So as I say, they tend to be more angry as they get older. And they also are not very close to their parents. So that's one way to set limits. But there's another way, as you can imagine. It's sort of the opposite of that. So that is permissive parenting, where you don't set any limits. But that's not good either. First of all, those children can be very hard to live with because they're spoiled, they want their way, and they expect that the parent will do whatever they want and will say yes to them. They also don't develop good habits. They don't get their homework done. They don't do what the parent is asking. In fact, they don't learn self-discipline because they're not asked to. The parent is not really asking them to learn self-discipline, to learn self-control. The parent often doesn't want the child to be unhappy. So the parent says when the child might, let's say you have a child who gets angry and they throw their toy across the room and they break their toy, right? Well, what would the authoritarian parent do, the strict parent? They would say, you don't deserve nice things. On to the naughty step with you, or smack, right? And by comparison, what would the permissive parent do? When the child gets angry, they're so angry, they throw their toy, the toy breaks. And what does the permissive parent say? This child is so sad their toy broke, they're crying. And the permissive parent says, oh, don't cry, we'll get you another one. And of course, that's not good for the child either. What's that child learning? That child's learning that there are no consequences to their actions. That child's learning that they don't have to control themselves, right? But they're learning something else that might even be worse. They're learning that their emotions are dangerous, that their parent thinks the emotions are dangerous and that the parent can't handle their emotions and will do anything to stop them from crying. So this is a child who will use that against the parent, but also might internalize that. They might begin to think that their emotions are dangerous and that they shouldn't feel those big emotions. And so they stuff their emotions. And what happens then? Well, emotions that are stuffed don't really stay stuffed. They start to bubble up to get healed, just like an infection would. An infection in your body would bubble up to get healed. Well, so would those stuffed feelings. And that makes the child anxious. So children who have permissive parenting get much more anxious. Children need clear limits or they become more anxious. They need clear limits so that they become self-disciplined, but they don't need the strict limits. So I said there were 4 ways that parents handle setting limits. One of them is authoritarianism. One is permissiveness. The third is just ignoring the limits and often ignoring the child. And these parents are usually so overwhelmed. They're working 2 jobs, or maybe they have an addiction problem. They just can't cope. And so they're unable to really show up and set limits for their child. And these kids really do the worst. They have the worst prognosis because they don't feel cared about. They don't feel like they matter to anyone. So they don't learn self-discipline. They don't learn to manage themselves emotionally. And they also don't feel cared about. Often by the time they're teenagers, they are looking for love in all the wrong places. And they are often even self-medicating. These are kids who end up with addiction problems as teenagers. So ignoring your child and not setting limits at all is not the answer. But I said there were 4 possibilities. Now we're on to the 4th one. The fourth possibility for parents is what we would call setting limits, but setting them with empathy. So empathic limits. And that sounds like, well, what does that mean? It just means you set the limits you need to set, but you do it with empathy, which is an understanding of how the child is feeling. You're helping them with their emotions, right? So the child with the toy who got so angry and they rolled their toy across the room and broke it, this parent is not going to go buy another toy, but they're also not going to get angry at the child. This parent will say, oh, you're so sad. You're crying. You broke your toy. You were so mad, right? You took it and you threw it. And then what happened? It broke. That's right. Your toy broke because you threw it. Yeah, I know that makes you so sad. No, sweetheart, we're not going to buy another toy. That was the only toy like that we had. We're not buying another one. It's not in our budget. I know that makes you very sad. And you give the child a hug, right? And they're allowed to have all their feelings about it, but you still don't go buy the new toy. You're not protecting the child from the consequences of their action. You're not protecting your child from feeling uncomfortable, right? You're setting whatever limit you need to. So we set limits all day, every day as parents, right? And what happens if your child won't do what you ask? Well, you can become more authoritarian. You can say, do that now, or I will punish you. Or we've already said that doesn't really work. Or you can become more permissive and say, oh, I don't care, go watch TV, right? And that doesn't work either, as we've learned, that permissive parenting. What does work is to say to the child, I know it's so hard to sit down and do your homework. I hear you don't want to do it. I know you've been working all day at school and the homework still needs to get done. How can we make this work for you, right? So you insist on the limit, but you give your child support so that they can meet your limit, so they can do what you meet your expectations.
Give me 1 second. I may have to stop share and share again. Thank you. So that was it. We
and
wanted
do what you're
to.
asking. And that's true no matter what limit.
Don't know why it went there again. I apologize. One last try. Nope, same place. Okay. There. Thank you all for bearing with me. So that was it for our presentation, and really we're hoping for more of an engagement. So hopefully the questions will come relatively soon. Anything that got your mind really thinking, examples, and maybe something that you would like to explore further, understand further. We are hoping to be able to answer some of those questions in unison. But this is our information. This is our best contact info, our phone numbers and emails for both Cecia and I.
We want to, of course, thank Side by Side, thank Bianca and Cecia and Vernon for being here tonight and helping us coordinate all of this. And as Bianca mentioned, if you have questions, go ahead and start typing them in the Q&A and we can read them live and have Bianca and Cecia answer those for us. If you don't have any questions, then obviously you are welcome to go, and thank you for attending tonight, our first Petaluma City School parent night across the district. So thank you for being here tonight. And let's see if we have any. We've got some thank yous to you too. Don't be afraid if you have questions. We're happy to answer them. We won't say your name if you don't want us to.
Los invitamos a que hagan cualquier pregunta que gusten. Si tienen algún escenario que quieran traer y que ellas les ayuden a solucionarlo, también pueden hacer esas preguntas.
Okay, well, you, a lot of you have my email information and Jimena's as well, because you have seen that go out on all of the Parent Square messages with both of our contact information on there. And then they just had we do have a question. Woohoo! Would you explain the material financial boundary? Because that was one of the boundaries that was mentioned. You're muted, Bianca.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, no problem. So the reason why I included all of the boundaries is because that's how many, that's the types of boundaries that there are. So it might not fit so much with the child or parent dynamic. However, I did want to include them. That's why I only touched on the physical and emotional and intellectual boundaries. More so, but material and financial would be over what your idea about budgeting is in the family, or some kind of situation that would bring on a discussion or conversation with maybe your partner, or with someone at work, or the family dynamic. So that is really what I was referring to when speaking to material or financial boundaries that we might hold. Thank you for asking that question. That was a good clarification question.
All right. So as I said, you guys have our contact information. Hopefully you took down the information on the last slide for Bianca and Cecia. And if there are no further questions, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you attending. We appreciate Side by Side putting this on and being here and giving us this great information. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Muchas gracias. Felices noches.